Hello and welcome to another edition of Empathy at the Table. Oh, you're in for a treat today. Listen, let me read you the profile of our next guest. His name was Eduard Beltran. He's an international negotiation and leadership advisor and speaker. He's also an author specializing in complex negotiations, strategic influence, and trust. He has more than 20 decades of experience. He advises governments, Fortune 500 companies, and global organizations on high stakes negotiations, crisis situations, and strategic decision making. Eduard is also a lecturer. He's taught at many prestigious universities around Europe. He combines his legal, strategic, and behavioral perspectives with a strong focus on real world application. And currently, check this out, currently he's conducting a doctoral research on asymmetric negotiation and strategic communication at the European Observatory of Communication. Finally, if you need more, he's the author of several books on negotiation and leadership, including Trust Me, which came out last year. He's a member also of the Harvard Business Review Advisory Council. There's a mouthful. Now, when you hear an introduction like that, you'd expect somebody to walk in with a crown and a cape. But Eduard is an extremely humble guy, and I'm really pleased to invite you, Eduard, to Empathy at the Table. Welcome.
Thank you, Tony. Thank you so much. Happy to be here with you today.
Great. So, Eduard, I've given you an introduction, and none of that is stuff that's not out there. But I was really impressed when I read your profile, and I thought, well, what a joy it will be to sit down and have a conversation with you. And so, for people who maybe have not heard of you, don't know much about the world of negotiation, could you just give us a brief introduction into your trajectory? I know you've been in this world since 2003, so you haven't just entered through the back door. Maybe give us a little bit of an idea as your landing and the field of travel that you've had so far.
Yeah, of course. So I guess that for the past 20, 25 years of my life, I've been exploring this concept of negotiation, right? I've been reading, writing, teaching, learning, researching, and of course, I've been negotiating myself. I started my career working for the French government. Actually, I worked for 4 ministers at that time in Paris. It was an amazing experience, as you can imagine, working both on national and bilateral negotiations, but also working with multilateral negotiations with the UN and many, many different entities. Then I work as a lawyer. Actually, I'm a lawyer since 2002, something like that. But basically working on investment and contract negotiations and the disputes and so on. And then little by little, I focus into this area of negotiation and I stopped working as a lawyer and I start a new career advising companies, helping professionals to improve their skills, teaching at university, doing some research, writing. So what I try to do today is probably getting a 360 degrees perspective about this concept of negotiation. I feel that we are negotiating more and more. I feel that our negotiations are more and more complex. And I feel I have this deep conviction that being good on negotiation helps you to be more successful and, of course, more happy in life and with your relationships.
Yeah. Right. We can take this conversation in many different directions, but I think what I'd like to open up with is a provocation that I heard in one of your interviews where you said you were taught Latin at school and you wish that you had been taught conflict resolution, trust building, and negotiation. So you were a lawyer, and now you've moved on to. Would it be fair to say you've moved on to the other side now to teach the stuff that wasn't taught in schools, or?
Not really. Well, I think it's negotiation is a very large area, right? So I have colleagues into this business. Some of them are from psychology background, from economics, from business, politics, of course. Even have some colleagues, they are actors, they are playing in movies and so on. So I feel that we can reach this area of negotiation from many different backgrounds. And I feel that a good lawyer is the one who helps you to negotiate, to protect your interests, not always going on litigation, but just helping you to protect your interests in many ways, right? And back to your point about Latin, my point here is that it's kind of a paradox, I feel, at least in France, in Spain, is that we spend a lot of time at school learning very interesting things for sure, but we are not learning the basics of human interaction, right? We're not learning how to protect our interests, how to collaborate, how to communicate, how to lead, how to influence. And that's why when I'm today training very experienced executive people, 40, 50, maybe sometimes 60 years old, sometimes it's the first real training on negotiation. And I think that's a big problem here. There is a big problem because we're negotiating all day long. We need to be good on negotiation, and still some of my participants, they never had a real training on negotiation. So let's try to change things, and I feel that things are changing slowly. But yeah, hopefully kids in next generations, they will learn how to negotiate, how to influence, how to communicate, and so on.
Yeah. I mean, I'm totally aligned with what you're saying. We obviously work in the same field. I'm encouraged by what I'm seeing with the younger generation, though. It feels to me that the younger generation are questioning things a lot more than we did. Right, when we were growing up, we just accepted that. You know, I did Latin at school, and I did Latin because it was on the curriculum, and that's what I had to learn. But my kids, they question things like that now, and because they hear, I guess, what I do for a living, they also are curious, and they negotiate with me all the time, but they negotiate from a position of curiosity as opposed to a position of kind of just. I guess trying to establish their own position. So my question here is, when you look at your experience over, I mean, you've worked in France, you've worked in Switzerland, you've worked in the UK, in Spain. I mean, you've literally travelled a lot. And do you notice a difference in the attitudes towards how negotiation is taught and received?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Of course, there's a big cultural component on negotiation, right? From one country to another. But if I may share with you what I feel it's bigger than geography, it's from one industry to another, from one company to another. I think that's much bigger difference. If you negotiate with a tech company, it could be another world from luxury or from banking or from insurance or whatever, right? So I really feel that, of course, we have this geographic cultural difference, but also the industry generation, we have other aspects, right? Some cultures, maybe they are more open to different styles of negotiation, and we have very interesting research on this topic, right? But I feel that by the end, it's a very human activity, it's a very human reality, and we are all of us worldwide facing the same challenge on negotiation. Is how to protect your interests, how to preserve the relationship, how to be creative, how to focus on long term, how to avoid irrational demands, and so on, right? It's going to change more in terms of communication than in terms of the real DNA of negotiation itself.
What I haven't heard you say is we haven't touched yet on value, right? And how people interpret value. Typically, when you hear people talk about negotiation, they extrapolate value in terms of dollars, right? How much money did you make from that deal? How much money did you save from that deal? But of course, you and I know that's just a small portion of being able to measure the successful outcome of a negotiation. Maybe could you expand a bit more on how you would actually perceive value in a negotiation?
Well, that's a fascinating topic, right? Because of course, money is something important in negotiation. I like to say that money is maybe the less important thing in negotiation. I think that terms and conditions could be much more important than money itself, right? But not only this, you're mentioning value, and we can consider reputation. We can consider relationship, right? We can consider networking and so on, right? So by the end, when we are closing a deal, of course, money, it's part of the equation. But I would say terms and conditions, your reputation, your relationship with the other side, your long-term perspective to preserve this business with them, the possibility to expand your network around your counterpart and so on, right? So I feel that if we take the big picture, it's a complete different perspective than feeling that's one shot, short term, and only about money, right? I like to give this example, right? You want to buy a car, you have two cars, one is 10,000, the other one is 12,000. Which one do you prefer? If they are, of course, if they are exactly the same, and 100% of people, they want to pay 10,000, not 12,000, right? But what if you can pay the 12,000 in 10 years from now, right? Suddenly maybe people prefer the 12,000 because you can pay later and so on. So price is one thing, but terms and conditions are other things. And of course, like you said, reputation, your image, many other things with a big value in negotiation.
Yeah, I like this direction because these are all intangibles. And because they're intangibles, it's difficult to measure them. So
Absolutely.
oftentimes people tend to diminish the importance of these intangibles. But as you said, they're in the shadows, but they are actually formulating the perceived value that we have when we look at a deal. How would you explain this to, let's say you were training a group of salespeople in a corporate company, in a tech company, and you needed to explain the rationale behind focusing on those intangibles. How would you actually sit down and explain that?
That's difficult, right? Because at the end of the year, you have an Excel table with money, right? And you are evaluated and you are considered because of this Excel table, right? As a commercial, as a sales people. Where do you put good reputation, right? Where do you put having a nice relationship? There's no line on your Excel table about that. That's one thing. But the second thing is that more and more we have companies working on that, right? Companies evaluating the value of a brand, the value of a reputation, how expensive could be this and that and so on. So I think that what I try to explain is that we should take the big picture, right? And taking the big picture means, okay, what do you want to get from this negotiation? And I fully understand that money is one of the things, but then there are other things to consider, right? So what are those other things? What do you want? Do you want a long-term relationship with them? Do you want, again, having a nice image, nice reputation? Do you want visibility maybe? Look at this, right? I'm doing some exercise with my participants where we work on this concept of visibility, right? And I have an exercise that is a new startup company negotiating with a big corporation. And one of the outcomes of the deal is, what if we go to a press release, or what if we communicate about this new partnership between the small company and the big one? For the big one, it's free, of course, communicating about a new partnership with a small tech company. But for the small tech company, this could be hundreds and thousands of dollars or euros in terms of communication, right? Advertising and so on. So I guess that it's a very abstract concept, just to go back to your question, until we put some concrete examples, right?
Yeah.
So once you illustrate, look, you are working with a huge corporation. What if in your website you can put, we partner with them or we work for them and so on? How much does it cost? Well, we don't know, but if you go to the advertising marketing company and you ask for how much would cost to go for a campaign, well, they would say it's going to be 100K. Well, you can get 100K from this negotiation just by accepting that you can use the logo of the company and so on, right? So I guess that once we go down into the concrete case, things are more visual and more easy to understand. Same thing about networking, right? Networking is abstract, but let's imagine that you are negotiating with with the buyer from a company in France. What if you put me in touch with your colleagues from Germany, Switzerland, Italy, Spain, and UK? Well, that's concrete. This means that you are moving from one contact to 10 more contacts. So from selling 1 million to 10 millions, just because you get the referral, the contact, and so on, right?
Yeah,
so I think that we should be in negotiation very concrete, both in teaching and also in negotiating, right? Very concrete. So as much as we can be in figures, data, examples, storytelling helps to illustrate everything.
I think it's also important just to add in there, because this has come up a lot. And in my experience, I've experienced this, is when a big company tries to leverage that and say, almost use it as a power move. You're a small company, I'm a large company. How much is having my logo worth on your website? And the danger comes when they use that as a tool of manipulation to get you to lower your price, or to, in some way, shape, or form, change your terms of business. So I think the important thing is maintaining, if you're a small company, is maintaining your own integrity, and your profit line, the profit sanity as well, and working on that. So if the big company is willing to have a conversation around what that looks like, then I think that's great. But if it's just simply a case of, look, you're going to be able to meet so many people if you do this for free. I'm sure you've been asked to come and do talks, and there's going to be 100,000 people in the audience, and these are all going to be your kind of target market. But you've got to fly here, and you've got to do this all for free. Well, I think it's important to be able to understand that dynamic as well, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. And it's all about, I guess, it's all about good preparation, right? Understanding what are your needs and what's your agenda and what are your priorities. Fully agree. So we need to be cautious on that, because otherwise, especially when dealing with big players, they know this very well, right? And they would say, okay, look, we're a good reference for you. This will help you to open doors and so on. Yeah, but I want cash flow, right?
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think it should be part of the equation, part of the discussion. But of course, I think it's all about a good preparation. If you are well prepared and you know exactly what are your targets, your demands, your needs, and so on, then you can protect them very well, because you can. It's not only about this, right? If we put 3-4 elements on the table, this could be one extra element to consider, but of course not the only one.
Yeah, totally agree. I think I saw one of your videos where you actually talk about the importance of preparation, right? Where people tend to forget about that part, or they think that preparation means I need to prepare everything that I want, right? Everything that I need, without really considering what may happen from the other side, right? What they might be looking for, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, well, I guess in life, preparation is everything, right? I mean, if you go for a weekend to Paris and you don't prepare your weekend, this will be a disaster, right? And if you think about football players, professional football players, they spend 80% of their time preparing and just 20% playing, right? If you think about rock stars, they are practicing and rehearsing and so on. If you think about even politicians, they prepare their debates and meetings and so on. So I feel that everything is about a good preparation, and negotiation is not an exception, of course. We need to prepare what are our objectives, what could be the alternatives, how I can, bring some data to the table, and so on, right? So I feel that preparation is a critical component, and of course, being good on that, it's probably 80% of your success.
Yeah.
That's my experience, at least.
And what when you work with a company, it's a two-part question. What is the motivation for the company to hire you? And then what's your motivation to say yes or no to this particular client?
Well, I guess the motivation for the companies, for sure, they are facing multiple challenge in negotiation, both internally and externally, or global challenge. So they have this kind of feeling or awareness that they need to improve their motivation skills. And they know that just by getting, that's my message, right? 1% more after the training, 1% more deals, 1% more profit, 1% more volume. This could be a huge improvement, right? So I guess that companies approach me because they need to improve their negotiation skills, and they know that with good training, coaching, advising, and so on, they can be more successful. That's point number one. Point number two, what I'm doing that? Well, I have two answers for this question. One is because I enjoy this a lot. I have a lot of fun doing this. And I love that. What I prefer in my professional life is one full day with participants, working on their cases, their challenge. And for me, it's like my passion. But two is that it's part of my probably philosophy of life. I really think that negotiation helps to improve our community, to improve our society, to improve our world by the end, right? So I feel that if all of us, we are more successful negotiating, we can be more happy, we can be more successful in life. So that's my small contribution to society, is to help companies, organizations. I work also for the French army. I work for many different entities, is to help them to improve their negotiation skills. I think that by the end, if all of us, we get 1% more, it can be a huge 1%.
Your book, Confiar en mí, Trust Me. I really, this splits the negotiation community in half when it comes to talking about trust. I speak to some practitioners who say trust has nothing to do with it, right? It's all about if you are able to provide a pragmatic, well-constructed deal, then and your product or service is best in class, then doesn't matter whether I trust you or not. And then on the other hand, trust is all important. If I don't trust you, then we can't even get to base one. And in one of your interviews, you gave the best example of that. I'll let you tell the story, but it's the story about United broke my guitar. And you shared that story. And I went and I did all this research on this and I started watching the videos. I think it's fantastic. So can you share the story on the lead-in as we start to talk about what's the power of trust in a relationship, in negotiations?
Well, it's a fascinating topic, right? Because like you said, and I fully agree with you, we have both sides, right? We have people saying like, well, trust, negotiation is not about trust, about other things, which I feel it's right? It's okay. And then people saying, well, trust is the foundation of everything, which is much more my approach. And of course, I feel that's right. We can negotiate with or without trust. That's not the issue. The only thing is that we know, and of course I guess that all of us we agree that's much nicer, successful, faster negotiating with trust, right? Back to the example, right? You mentioned the example of the guitar player, right? That they broke the guitar and he went on YouTube, right? And recording a song, right? So I think it's a very good example because it's not only about trust. I mean, it's about trust, but it's also about power. It's also about the concept of power, right? What does it mean to be powerful today in negotiation? And this is an example of a conflict between a big airplane company, right? And between a guitar player. And I'm not talking about Bob Dylan or Eric Clapton, right? I'm talking about a young guitar player who was not very famous, but he was frustrated because he wanted to check in the guitar and they said no and so on, where a typical conflict with the airplane company. And finally the guitar was broken and of course he was very disappointed and he went on YouTube and he played a song joking about that and so on. And well, the impact was huge in terms of communication, in terms of reputation, in terms of image and so on. And I think that there's two learning points from this. One is that today everything could be visible very quickly for the best and for the worst, right? This podcast hopefully will be very visible, so you never know what could happen, right? But suddenly things could go very, very fast. And two is the concept of power and the symmetry of power. Today is not that clear who is the most powerful into a situation.
Yeah.
I don't know, is the US more powerful than Luxembourg? Well, yes, from any perspective, and maybe not from other perspective. I don't know, right? It's Apple or Tesla or whatever, Coca-Cola more powerful than a small startup? Well, I don't know, right? It's a personal. It's a person more or less powerful than other. I don't know. I think it's a very interesting topic because by the end, power is a very abstract concept as well. Yeah. And I think that this case, what illustrates again is the power of small things, right? And how today with, of course, media, communication, and so on, things could go super fast. And suddenly you can break things very quickly, right? And and something else about that, I think it's irony. I think it's important, right? Joking and having fun and enjoying things. These things help in negotiation as well, right?
Humor, yeah. So bring in the sense of humor. And so when we started talking about trust, I wondered whether you think trust could be reduced to tactics, whether there are tactics to build trust. And then as I did some more research, you came out with 4 levers to create trust. I think you said authenticity, logic, empathy, and integrity. And so where I started thinking was, where is the line between using this knowledge as manipulation to manipulate and artificially create trust versus doing it in a real authentic way?
Well, the difference between manipulation and what we can call influence I think it's very clear from my perspective is what it's a legal concept, is what we call, or at least we use it from a legal perspective, but in social perspective as well, is what we call good faith or bad faith. In other words, what's your intention in that, right? And the tricky thing, and I fully align with you, is that we can use the same tactics for influence and for manipulation. And when it comes to talk about trust, of course, yes, we can inspire trust with a good purpose or with a bad purpose, right? By the end, if you don't know if you are using or applying as a negotiator good faith or bad faith, I have a question for you. I mean, for the audience and for everyone is, ask yourself if you would do that to your parents or to your brother or to your best friend. If the answer is yes, well, probably it's good faith, right? Because you're acting in an honest and authentic and a good way. If your answer is maybe no or no, then just double check if you should go this way or not, right? So yeah, absolutely. And I think that's, trust is it's like a knife, right? With a knife, you can kill someone or you can prepare the best meal for your friends, right? So depending what you're doing with that, as many things in life, right? And I think that it's not an exception, of course. Trust is part of life. Trust is part of our social community and human interactions. So some people are using this for their advantage, some people for the purpose of the relationship. So I think by the end, it's what's the purpose behind your actions.
Yeah. It does bring, the moral angle into it. But I like you, I think I always start from a starting point, which is better humans make better managers, better leaders, better people, just better interactions. So I think if you start with that as your base, then all of your interactions then I suggest would follow. But can you talk more about these four levers? I quite like them. I'd like to hear how they're used in your observations to build trust: authenticity, logic, empathy, and integrity.
Yeah, well, I think it's a package of things, right? It's not that we need just one or two or three or four. It's that we need the whole package. And by the end, it's a matter of observation. Trust, it's not an accident, right? Trust is not an accident. The fact that you are trusting someone, it's not random. It's not good luck or bad luck. It's because the person that you are trusting is doing something, right? Is doing some concrete actions. And the interesting part of that, just before jumping to the four pillars, is that what I observe is that in our private life, we need time, right? So let's imagine you have a new neighbor in your community, in your building. Well, maybe you need, 6 months, 1 year, maybe more, maybe 2 to 3 years to trust this person and to say, hey, come to my place, we have coffee together. Or, I'm going to let my kids, or I'm going to give you my kids, or it takes time, right? In life, requires time. In business, we don't have time. In business, in negotiation, sometimes you are meeting someone for the first time and we need to close a deal in 2 hours. You cannot say, hey, nice to meet you, Tony, but I need 6 years to trust you because we need to close the deal in 2 hours, right? I want to close the deal before lunch break or whatever. So what I observe is that, yes, we have some actions that we can do, we can repeat, and those are the four that you mentioned, right? Authenticity, point number one, well, you should be real, right? And authenticity is all about being honest, it's about being yourself. And that's why I'm always encouraging people to be yourself with your accent, with your body language, with your dress code, with your way to communicate. Because by the end, when you see a comedian or a politician, or when you see you like them or not, but you can check quickly if they are authentic or not, right? And I feel that that's something very, very obvious, right? That when you see some, again, politicians or negotiators, by the way, you're a businessman, you can tell from the beginning if they are authentic, if they are themselves, or if they are playing a game, or if they are wearing a mask or not. So I feel this is a starting point, right? Just be real, be yourself. And that's all about also being transparent, being honest, not lying, and so on, right? So try to be as much as you can yourself. And that's not easy because sometimes we don't like ourselves, right? Sometimes sometimes we are shy, or we are frustrated, or we are many things about ourselves, right? So it's not easy to show our real us. And this works from a personal relationship to a business relationship, right? But point number one is Just try to be yourself again with your real you, right? About logical reasoning, I think it's very interesting because this makes a huge difference. Facts and data, right? And that's probably my legal background. But when we talk about negotiation, things like big, small, fast, slow, soon, later means nothing. And this doesn't create trust, right? I always share the same example. Let's imagine we're in a negotiation and you ask me something and my answer is, well, I think that maybe, probably, well, I would say yes. You're not going to trust me. But if my answer is to the same question is, absolutely, Tony, this is Article 5 of the contract. Article 5.3 said that we are supposed to do this. Well, I'm factual, I'm concrete. So suddenly you see that I'm based on data, on facts. So this opens the door for more trust, of course, and for more cooperation. Empathy, of course, is I guess one of the biggest topics, right? It's your topic as well. It's all about showing that you are not the enemy, right? Basically, it's showing that you are not the enemy, that you're controlling your ego, and that it's not only me, but I understand you. I'm focusing on you. I want to understand and I want to learn about you and I want to respect your needs. And point number 4 about integrity, I feel that's probably something, I'm not going to say new, but in some cultures is getting more and more, is that if I'm with someone doing something illegal, even if this illegal thing is not against me, I don't like that. Right? So I'm not going to follow someone and I'm not going to trust someone who's not respecting the rules for many reasons. But one of the reasons is just because I don't like it, right? And I feel that our societies are changing more and more about this point, right? People, they don't like when others are not respecting the rules. So if I have someone drinking too much alcohol and driving, I don't like this. But not only because of the danger and not only because of it's illegal, but because I don't like the attitude. I don't like the lack of integrity about respecting others and so on. So I feel that when you are negotiating with someone who shows you integrity, even with small things, this creates a nice impact in terms of trust. So by the end, trust is a melange or different things together. Of course, if you feel that you are not very good on authenticity, because maybe wherever, you can work more on logical reasoning. If you feel that you're not that good on empathy, maybe you can be more strong on integrity and so on. So by the end, it's a package of different things. But that's the result of my observation, my research and so on, is that when you are negotiating with or without knowing, you are checking the 4 boxes in front of you. Is this person real? Is this person showing facts and data that make sense? Is this person showing empathy towards me? And is this person playing integrity or not?
Great checkbox. A word that you've said a lot, and I use it a lot, and I guess it's inferred, is observe. And I think maybe to be a great negotiator, you really need to have a heightened sense of observation. And it seems that the super negotiators not only are able to observe others, but they're able to observe themselves in real time as well.
Absolutely.
Would you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that we can go back to a very classical concept of negotiation. That's from William Ury and Mary Parker Follett from the early 20th centuries. Go to the balcony. We need to go to the balcony, right? And if you like football, right? Being born and raised in Barcelona, football is like a big thing for us. You don't see the match. You don't see the same match if you are playing that if you are up there observing, right? And I feel the same thing in negotiation. And like you said, you need to observe from a different perspective, both what's going on the negotiation table, but also what's going on in terms of the relationship, in terms of the big picture, and so on. And that's not easy, right? It's not easy because you are kind of playing the movie and watching the movie at the same time. That's why I think this idea of going to the balcony and asking yourself, what's my objective, what's my long-term goal, and so on, helps, right? But observation is a big thing in life in general, right? I think it's one of my pleasures in Paris is to sit down, having a coffee and just observing life, observing people and observing how things are moving. Same thing in negotiation. You need to relax and to observe. And that's why for critical negotiations, we suggest to be at least 2, And one of them should observe, should be the one keeping this big picture, this relationship, the process, and so on, right?
Yeah. So many things. We are coming to the end, but I think I've got a couple of more questions. First, it's a comment, and this is my observation. When I speak to guests on the show and when I'm meeting people, I always wonder what it would be like to negotiate with this person. And sometimes I think, oh, this would be a real tough negotiation. And other times I think it would be a delight. And the sense I'm getting from you is I would just love to just negotiate with you, whatever the topic, right? Even if it's a contentious topic, I think it would be just such a fun, curious pursuit just to negotiate something with you, right? So that's just an observation I wanted to share. But there's something I want your comment on this as well. This is an observation I had. As you know, I've been in Barcelona for over 20 years, and I set up a company which we organize conferences all over the world. And I set up this company in 2003, and I started hiring people. And what I observed, because I hired like Germans, I hired obviously locals, I hired French people. What I observed was that the locals that I had in my team seemed to have a real distrust of me as their employer for some reason. And I remember being fascinated. Where does this distrust come from? And then as I spoke to other people, I kind of got that same sense that there seems to be some kind of distrust between employers and employees. And this was like 20 odd years ago. I'm sure things have changed now, but it was something that I noticed really starkly when I first arrived in Barcelona, and it seemed every worker was like a mini lawyer, and they knew their rights and they would use them. And I was quite surprised because I go on trust, whereas this went on, it seemed like a different interaction. Would that be a fair assumption, or things changed, you think?
No, I think you're right, and I feel that my personal answer to this question is that our society in the past 10, probably 20 years, maybe more, I mean our society, I mean our families, I mean our companies, our organizations, our political organizations as well, we're moving from a much more pyramids to much more flat structure, right? I observed this, I've been teaching negotiation at the university for the past 12 years. And I can observe how 12 years ago, still we had this authority with the professor, right? And kind of respect and kind of, which I think is good and not good at the same time, right? Because you lose some kind of connection, but you preserve this position. Now I feel things are much more flat and people are much more into this collaboration, right? So I think I think that we are in these old European countries. We still have a lot with, our past, and our past was based on this power, based on authority, and so on. And they feel that now things are probably slowly moving to other things, right? But 20 years ago, or maybe still today in some companies, power means the one who's paying me, the one who's deciding, the one who's driving me. And this means a lot of things. So that's why there's some kind of some kind of feeling that what if I'm following the wrong person, or what if I'm not protecting my interest, or what if this person is not focusing on me. But I feel that's something changing again in every single social organization, from family, countries, and so on.
Yeah. Eduard, this has been a really great conversation, and I'd like to just ask you, what is it you're working on right now that's really exciting, and how can our listeners find you?
Well, I'm working now on a topic that I think it's one of my fascinating topics today. Is the concept of asymmetry in power, right? Power. I think power is a very interesting thing. We already mentioned this a few minutes ago. I'm doing a research right now, like you mentioned, for a few years now, and hopefully closing in a few months from now, about the power of some organizations without formal power, but the ability to change things. So what I'm working now is how in our very complex world and community, from business to politics, and from our social community to our global worldwide community, things are changing and the concept of power is changing, right? What does it mean, again, a powerful negotiator? The classical answer was having alternatives. Today, I think it's much more complex than this. So that's something I'm working on. I'm working on the concept of the three forces of power as well, the three forces of negotiation, which is, from my perspective, is perception, is power and pressure. So I'm working on many things. Hopefully it's going to be my new book, maybe this year, or maybe next year probably. And yes, I'm working on many things. So people can follow me easily on LinkedIn. I try to be very active on LinkedIn. I love this platform. I feel it's a very good way to express your ideas and what you're doing, and also on my website. But I would say mainly LinkedIn is a very nice way. So for all of your audience, if they want to connect with me, very happy to connect with people and to meet new people worldwide.
Thank you. And we'll put all the details in the show notes. I always say to my guests, when I finish, I always say, well, it'd be nice one day if you're ever in Europe, it'd be great to sit down and maybe have a coffee or have a glass of wine together. But this time, I think it's going to be possible because you're just you're like couple of hours away.
Yeah, of course.
When you are next in Barcelona, please let me know, and I'd love to just sit down, grab a coffee, and have a real deep conversation with you, Eduard.
Me too. It was a great conversation today, and I'm sure it would be even better around a coffee, a beer, or a glass of wine. So
a glass
more
of
than
wine,
happy.
Even better.
More than happy.
Eduard Beltran, thank you for joining us on Empathy at the Table.
Thank you, Tony. Thank you so much.